Let me ask you something. How many times this week have you told someone, I'm so busy? It's become our standard answer, right? Almost like a badge of honor. But what if all this busyness isn't a sign of success? What if it's a trap? One that's costing us the only thing we can never, ever get back, a life lived without regret. Today, we're going to dig into that and figure out how to choose a real life, not just a way to make a living. Let's start with this. This right here is the single most common regret people have on their deathbeds. This insight comes from a palliative care nurse named Bronnie Ware. She spent years just listening to the final thoughts of her patients, and this one came up more than any other. It's a really powerful place to begin our whole conversation. To really get a handle on the choices we're making every single day, it's kind of wild, but we have to start at the end. By looking at what people regret the most when their time is almost up, we get this brutally honest look at what actually matters in the long run. So look at this list. You start to see a pattern, right? Not living your own life, working yourself into the ground, not saying how you feel, losing friends, and literally not allowing yourself to be happy. So much of this isn't about what you achieved. It's about how you lived. It's not about the fancy job title or the bigger house. It's about connection, being real, and just time.
Okay, so these are some pretty heavy end-of-life regrets. And it makes you wonder, how do so many of us wind up on a path that leads straight to them? Well, for a lot of us, the answer is we fall into something called the busy trap.
This idea, the busy trap, it really took off thanks to a writer named Tim Kreider. And his whole argument is that being busy has become the default setting for our society. It's a trap because a lot of the time we walk right into it ourselves. We jam-pack our schedules, not always because we have to, but because that empty space, well, it can feel a little scary, right? Like maybe we're not important enough if we're not busy. And this is such a key distinction to make. There's a huge difference between being overworked because you have no choice and choosing busyness as a lifestyle. The person who's truly struggling to make ends meet, they almost never brag about how busy they are. They're just tired. But then you have the person who's willingly trapped. They complain, sure, but it's almost like a weird flex, a status symbol. And Kreider's point is pretty sharp here. He's saying all this running around isn't a sign that your life is full. A lot of the time, it's the exact opposite. It's just a distraction, a way to keep from asking those really hard questions, like, am I actually happy? Am I fulfilled? Is this really the life I want to be living? So what's the go-to excuse? We all know it. I'd love to, but I just don't have the time. But is that actually true? Let's take a second and really deconstruct that idea. Let's break down the numbers. Okay, let's do some quick math. There are 8,736 hours in a year. That's it. That's what we all get. Now, let's be generous and say you work a 50-hour week, commute included. That's about 29% of your year. You get a solid 8 hours of sleep a night. That's another 33%. And what's left? That giant chunk right there, almost 40%, that's your time. Let's put a hard number on that slice of your time. It's over 3,000 hours. 3,319 to be exact. Think about that for a second. That is actually more time than you spend at work. The time is there. The real question is, what are we doing with it? And this is really the heart of it all. This is the phrase to remember. When we say, I don't have time, what we're often really saying is, it's not a priority. Ouch, I know, that's a tough one to hear, but it's also incredibly freeing. It means time isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you decide how to spend. All right, so if we agree it's not really a time problem, but a priority problem, what do we do about it? Well, it means we need a whole new way of thinking, a shift away from always chasing more and toward understanding what is enough. And there's this fantastic little story that explains it perfectly. So the story kicks off with this high-powered businessman. He's on vacation, right? Kicking back in some small, quiet fishing village. And he sees this local fisherman with a small boat who's just brought in a few fish for the day. And the businessman is just appalled at how relaxed this guy is. So he decides he's got to give him some advice. So he walks up to the fisherman and says something like, "Hey, why'd you stop so early? If you stayed out longer, you could have caught way more fish." The fisherman just kind of looks at him, smiles, and asks this really simple but really profound question. Why should I?
And the businessman, he just gets going, right? He launches into this whole grand plan. With more fish, you could buy a bigger boat. With a bigger boat, you could hire a crew, start a company, become a millionaire. And then you could retire early, move to a quiet little fishing village, and spend your days just relaxing on the beach and fishing.
And boom, there it is. The punchline that just completely flips the script on our whole hustle culture mindset. The fisherman already has the exact life that the businessman is working himself to death to someday maybe achieve. He got it. The goal isn't some destination you reach at the end. It's the way you're living right now. That's a great story, a great philosophy, but how do we actually do that? How do we become more like the fisherman in our crazy modern lives? Well, there's a really practical tool for this, and it's called the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle. The idea is simple. Roughly 80% of your results, the good stuff, come from only 20% of your efforts. The whole game is just figuring out what that vital 20% is.
Okay, philosophy is great, but let's get practical. Let's build an actual action plan. This is how you can start to escape that busy trap and design a life that actually means something to you so you don't end up with those regrets we talked about.
Here it is, a simple 3-step plan. Step 1, you've got to find your vital 20%. Seriously, sit down and ask yourself, what are the handful of things I do that actually create most of the value or joy in my life and work? Step 2, block time for them. Put them in your calendar, treat them like a doctor's appointment you absolutely cannot miss. And finally, step 3, be ruthless with the other 80%. The trivial stuff, delegate it, automate it, or just plain stop doing it. This is about working smarter, not just harder. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to this. It's a choice. We've seen that busyness is usually a trap, that we have way more time than we think, and that a few key things drive most of our happiness. So the real question isn't whether you're busy, it's what you're busy with. You have the brush, you have the canvas. So what are you going to paint?